Now that the DJI Osmo Action 5 Pro is here, you might be wondering whether this or the Osmo Pocket 3 is the best choice for when you're going out and vlogging. So in this video, I'm going to try and answer the questions that you might have, and I'll share with you a number of reasons why I would choose one over the other. But before I get onto the differentiators which are potentially going to help you make that choice in the end as to which one might be the best camera for you, there are several things that are basically the same that you're going to get no matter which camera you choose. So I'll talk about those ones first. With both of the cameras, you can use the DJI Mic 2 connected via Bluetooth, which is what I'm doing with the Osmo Pocket 3 at the moment, and this is what the audio sounds like when you're using it with the Mic 2 connected via Bluetooth. And now this is what the audio sounds like with the DJI Mic 2 transmitter connected to the Osmo Action 5 Pro via Bluetooth. So with both of the cameras as well, you can connect two Mic 2 transmitters, whereas with the Action 4 you can only connect one, but both of them allow you to connect two transmitters via direct Bluetooth connection. The other great thing about the DJI Mic 2 transmitters as well is that you can have the audio recorded internally as a backup file as soon as you press record on either of the cameras. So this is a setting that you just go through and you do that in the camera, and it means that you can get a 32-bit float recording as a backup file, and it means that you've just got that clean recording if anything happens to your audio. But if you don't have a DJI Mic 2 transmitter and you're not really thinking of getting one, then you can still use other external microphones. All you have to do is just connect them via the USB-C and that will work just fine. You can even get an adapter for USB-C to 3.5mm adapter as well if you have other mics that aren't USB-C. But it's just really convenient using the Mic 2s because they just connect directly to the cameras. And you can also use them as a remote to start and stop recording and also take photos, which is very handy. Both cameras have the exact same colour profiles, but the Osmo Action 5 Pro has one addition because it has the normal colour profile in 10-bit and also in 8-bit, whereas the Osmo Pocket 3 only has a 10-bit option. But in terms of the video quality, the Pocket 3 has higher quality in the normal colour profile, but in D-Log-M the quality is pretty much matched. And in terms of the dynamic range, they're both great. I wouldn't say one does better than the other necessarily. They're just both really good in that respect. Both cameras have the sharpness and noise reduction features that were first introduced to the Osmo Action 4. And with these settings, I tend to have them set so that the sharpness is at -2 and the noise reduction is at -1. Then in post, I add a little bit of sharpness back in so that I can control how much I add. If you have the sharpness set higher in the camera, then you're kind of stuck with that look, which kind of sucks if you don't end up liking the way the footage looks. Each camera has a dedicated low light mode. The Osmo Pocket 3 has the low light video mode and the Osmo Action 5 Pro has super night video mode. Both of these video modes are really best used when you've got really low light levels without much artificial light lighting the scene. Otherwise the footage can look a little bit weird. More so on the Action 5 Pro though, it's more stressed on the Action 5 Pro. But in normal situations, so for example, when it's overcast or you're walking through a forest or you're indoors in a low lit environment, both cameras will do a really great job in maintaining a high level of image quality just in the normal colour profile. But the Osmo Pocket 3, to me, does a way better job, even with its low light video mode in dark situations over the Osmo Action 5 Pro. But in terms of how they drastically differ from each other from a vlogging perspective, there are 8 key differences that I think are worth highlighting. But it's also worth remembering that the Osmo Action 5 Pro is designed as an action camera, which has the ability to be used for vlogging as well, whereas the Osmo Pocket 3 is an actual dedicated vlogging camera. So just bear that in mind. When it comes to the gimbal of the Osmo Pocket 3, it has its advantages over the Osmo Action 5 Pro for a few reasons. In low light situations, the shutter speed drops to compensate for the loss of light, but when that happens and you're not using a gimbal, then the footage can be jittery and slightly unstable, which is what happens with the Osmo Action 5 Pro because it relies on the electronic stabilisation. So the same goes for when you're using filters, because I'd imagine the reason that you're looking to use them in the first place is to get that natural looking motion blur in your footage. which means that you're going to have to drop the shutter down to use the 180-degree shutter rule. And then thirdly, while this isn't necessarily a requirement, it's just a nice to have, the Pocket 3 can get some really nice creative shots because of its gimbal, but the Action 5 Pro just on an extension rod can be a little bit restrictive. So in any of these scenarios, if you were leaning more towards the Osmo Action 5 Pro, all you'd need to do is get a gimbal. For my action cameras, I use the Hohem iSteady Pro 4 because it's easier to mount and dismount the camera without having to unscrew anything like you have to do with other gimbals. And one of the other features of this gimbal is the fact that it's splash proof, so it's going to maintain that weather sealing of the action cameras. So if you were to get caught in the rain, or you were wanting to go out whilst it was snowing, then you don't necessarily have to worry. And that's one of the advantages of using this combination of the gimbal and the Action 5 Pro over the Osmo Pocket 3. The only thing the Hohem iSteady Pro 4 doesn't do is allow you to operate the Action 5 Pro from the gimbal like it does with a GoPro, like triggering the record button, for example. But it will charge the camera for you through the gimbal, so you're also getting extended battery life there. So going back to the creative shots, for example, I could use the Action 5 Pro to shoot B-roll from an awkward position, or fake drone shots with an extension pole attached to the bottom of the gimbal. And it's made even easier by having this phone mount attached, which means that I can just get a better view of what's in the frame, especially if the camera is too far away from me to see the screen. Even if I wanted to vlog and see a bigger view of myself, I could use the gimbal and have my phone mounted on the side. And also, to show you the difference between slower shutter speeds or low light footage, with and without the gimbal, you can see the difference that the gimbal makes. So I've dropped a link in the description to the Hohem iSteady Pro 4 so that you can check it out for yourself, and thanks to Hohem for sponsoring this video. When it comes to the field of view and depth of field, the Osmo Action 5 Pro is going to give you the widest field of view, even in its standard D-warp setting. Some people don't like that, but I kind of like how immersive it is when vlogging so that it shows off the surroundings. But that's not to say that the Osmo Pocket 3 isn't wide, because with its 20mm focal length, you're still going to get enough of the background in the frame that you don't just have a floating head. Plus, you can attach the wide-angle lens, giving you 15mm for a wider field of view. And with the Osmo Pocket 3, you get a shallow depth of field, giving you a blurry background if you like that kind of look. Whereas with the Osmo Action 5 Pro, you don't get that shallow depth of field. And the minimum focusing distance is greater than that of the Osmo Pocket 3. So if you want to shoot anything close up, then the Osmo Pocket 3 is going to be the better option. It also has a product showcase focus mode. So you can hold up an object to the camera and it will snap focus onto that object as a priority rather than trying to keep the focus on your face. The other focus options are to set the continuous focus so that it keeps adjusting the focus based on your subject's movements, or you can set single focus, which is just focusing on one place without constantly adjusting, which can be really useful when you're shooting B-roll. But being fixed focus, the Osmo Action 5 Pro doesn't have these options. With the stabilisation, they're both so smooth that one doesn't necessarily outdo the other. So even though the Osmo Pocket 3 has a gimbal, the Osmo Action 5, when you're using Rocksteady, you don't even need to use Rocksteady Plus, you can just use Rocksteady, and that is still going to give you really smooth footage when you're walking and talking. Even though the Action 5 Pro has a subject tracking video mode, it's not the same as the tracking on the Osmo Pocket 3 because obviously it's competing with the gimbal. The Action 5 Pro drops the resolution down to 2.7K so that you can use the rest of the sensor to keep the subject central, whereas the Osmo Pocket 3 uses the gimbal to follow the subject, and not only can it be used with human subjects, it can also be used with objects and pets as well when you use the dynamic tracking feature. With the Osmo Action 5 Pro though, you can only use the subject tracking with human subjects, so it won't work with objects and it won't work with pets. Now, as I briefly mentioned earlier, the Osmo Pocket 3 doesn't have any weather sealing, so if you get caught in the rain you kind of have to stop filming, whereas the Osmo Action 5 Pro, being an action camera, is completely waterproof. So that's something to consider if you know that you're going to be filming when it's raining or whether it's snowing, or if you're going to be going on holiday or going on a beach, for example, because I wouldn't necessarily take my Osmo Pocket 3 on a beach because there's just too many possibilities for there to get sand and dust in there. So that's again something to just consider. In terms of durability, as I mentioned, this comparison is for vlogging. It's just for everyday vlogging use. It's not for crazy activities. So you might not think durability matters until you throw children into the mix. So for example, if I was going on holiday, there's no way I would let my children use my Osmo Pocket 3 because they're very young, and even though they try and be careful, they could still drop it and then it could break. Whereas if I give them the Action 5 Pro, I have absolutely no problems there. I'll give it to them and I can turn my back and do whatever I'm doing and they can film, and I wouldn't have to constantly be watching to make sure that they're not going to damage the camera. So in terms of that perspective, if you're thinking of using this on family trips and you want to give the camera to a young kid so that they can film as well, if they have an interest in that, then the Action 5 Pro is definitely going to be the better option in that respect, even with a gimbal on it. So both of these cameras support fast charging, but I guess one of the biggest advantages of the Osmo Action 5 Pro over the Osmo Pocket 3 is the fact that the Action 5 Pro has swappable batteries. And even though the Osmo Pocket 3 has a swappable battery handle, it's quite pricey if you want to get another one, whereas with the Osmo Action 5 Pro, the batteries are a lot cheaper. Plus, with the Adventure combo, you get 3 batteries and a charging case, and it just means that you can swap out the batteries throughout the day as they die. But you can also get the new multifunctional charging handle for the Osmo Action 5 Pro as well, and it's got quite a few features with it, so I will talk about that in another video, but that's also a solution. With the Osmo Pocket 3, the battery handle does give a massive boost to the Pocket 3's battery life, and when it dies, you can actually take it off and then charge it whilst you keep using the Pocket 3. The Osmo Action 5 Pro obviously has the larger screen size on the rear, but this is based on vlogging, so even though the front touchscreen of the Osmo Action 5 Pro is a decent size and enough to see yourself and change settings, the Osmo Pocket 3 is larger and therefore just more convenient. There's not really any doubt that I would say that the Osmo Pocket 3 is an incredible camera for vlogging in any lighting situation. And it just makes sense, it's what it was created for. But you just have to consider where and how you're going to be filming, because for me, that's what is the deciding factor between the two cameras, especially when you factor in things like low light and weather. So if you want to find out more about the Osmo Pocket 3, or maybe you're now thinking you kind of like the look of the Osmo Action 5 Pro, but you're wondering how it stacks up against the Osmo Action 4, because that is still a very good camera, then you can check out either of these two videos.